The Africa Cup of Nations, officially CAN, also referred to as African Cup of Nations, or AFCON, is the main international association football competition in Africa. It is sanctioned by the Confederation of African Football, and was first held in 1957. Since 1968, it has been held every 2 years. The title holders at the time of a FIFA Confederations Cup qualify for that competition. In 1957 there were only 3 participating nations: Egypt, Sudan and Ethiopia. South Africa was originally scheduled to compete, but were disqualified due to the apartheid policies of the government then in power. Since then, the tournament has grown greatly, making it necessary to hold a qualifying tournament. The number of participants in the final tournament reached 16 in 1998, and since then, the format has been unchanged, with the 16 teams being drawn into 4 groups of 4 teams each, with the top 2 teams of each group advancing to a knockout stage. Egypt is the most successful nation in the Cup's history, winning the tournament a record of 7 times. Ghana and Cameroon have won 4 titles each. 3 different trophies have been awarded during the tournament's history, with Ghana and Cameroon winning the first 2 versions to keep after each of them won a tournament 3 times. The current trophy was first awarded in 2002, and with Egypt winning it indefinitely after winning their unprecedented 3rd consecutive title in 2010. As of 2013, the tournament was switched to being held in odd-numbered years so as not to clash with the FIFA World Cup. History: 1950s-60s. Origin and early years. The origin of the African Nations Cup dates from June 1956. When the creation of the Confederation of African Football was proposed during the 3rd FIFA Congress in Lisbon, there were immediate plans for a continental tournament to be held in February 1957. The first African Cup of Nations was held in Khartoum, Sudan. There was no qualification for this tournament, the field being made up of the 4 founding nations of CAF. South Africa's insistence on selecting only white players for their squad due to its apartheid policy led to its disqualification, and as a consequence Ethiopia were handed a bye straight to the final. Hence, only 2 matches were played, with Egypt being crowned as the first continental champion after defeating hosts Sudan in the semi-final and Ethiopia in the final. 2 years later Egypt hosted the second ANC in Cairo with the participation of the same 3 teams. Host and defending champions Egypt again won, after defeating Sudan. The field grew to include 9 teams for the third ANC in 1962 in Addis Ababa, and for the first time there was a qualification round to determine which 4 teams would play for the title. Host Ethiopia and reigning champion Egypt received automatic berths, and were joined in the final 4 by Nigeria and Tunisia. Egypt made its 3rd consecutive final appearance, but it was Ethiopia that emerged as victors, after first beating Tunisia and then downing Egypt in extra time. 1960s. Ghanaian domination. In 1963, Ghana made its first appearance as it hosted the event, and won the title after beating Sudan in the final. They repeated that as they became champions 2 years later in Tunisia, equaling Egypt as 2-time winners, with a squad that included only 2 returning members from the 1963 team. The 1968 competition's final tournament format expanded to include 8 of the 22 teams entered in the preliminary rounds. The qualifying teams were distributed in 2 groups of 4 to play single round-robin tournaments, with the top 2 teams of each group advancing to semi-finals, a system that remained in use for the finals until 1992. The Democratic Republic of Congo won its first title, beating Ghana in the final. Starting with the 1968 tournament, the competition has been regularly held every 2 years in even-numbered years. Côte d'Ivoire forward Laurent Pokou led the 1968 and 1970 tournaments in scoring, with 6 and 8 goals respectively, and his total of 14 goals remained the all-time record until 2008. Play was covered for television for the first time during the 1970 tournament in Sudan, as the hosts lifted the trophy after defeating Ghana, who were playing their fourth consecutive final. 1970s. A decade of champions. 6 different nations won titles from 1970 to 1980. Sudan, Congo Brazzaville, Zaire, Morocco, Ghana, and Nigeria. Zaire's second title in the 1974 edition came after facing Zambia in the final. For the only time to date in the history of the competition, the match had to be replayed as the first contest between the two sides ended in a 2-2 draw after extra time. The final was restaged 2 days later with Zaire winning 2-0. Forward Malambara Ende scored all 4 of Zaire's goals in these 2 matches. He was also the top scorer of the tournament with 9 goals, setting a single tournament record that remains unmatched. 3 months earlier, Zaire had become the first black African nation to qualify to the FIFA World Cup. Morocco won their first title in the 1976 ANC held in Ethiopia, and Ghana took its third championship in 1978, becoming the first nation to win 3 titles. 1980s. Cameroonian domination. In 1980, Nigeria hosted the event and beat Algeria to capture its first championship. Ghana's 4th continental title came in the 1982 Cup tournament. They beat Algeria in the semi-finals in extra time, and faced host Libya in the final. The match ended in a 1-1 draw after 120 minutes, and Ghana won the penalty shootout to become champions. Cameroon won the first title 2 years later by beating Nigeria, and in the 1986 Cup they faced Egypt, absent from the finals since 1962, with Egypt winning the title on penalty kicks. Cameroon reached its 3rd consecutive final in the 1988 tournament and won their 2nd championship by repeating their 1984 victory over Nigeria. 1990s. The return of South Africa. In 1990, Nigeria lost once again as they made their 3rd final appearance in 4 tournaments, this time falling to Algeria. The 1992 Cup of Nations expanded the number of final tournament participants to 12. The teams were divided into 4 groups of 3, with the top 2 teams of each group advancing to quarter-finals. Ghanaian midfielder Abedi Pele Ayew, who scored 3 goals, was named the best player of the tournament after his contributions helped Ghana reach the final. He was, however, suspended for that match, and Ghana lost to Côte d'Ivoire in a penalty shootout that saw each side make 11 attempts to determine the winner. Côte d'Ivoire set a record for the competition by holding each of their opponents scoreless in the 6 matches of the final tournament. The 12-team, 3-group format was used again 2 years later, where hosts Tunisia were humiliated by their first-round elimination. Nigeria, who had just qualified to the World Cup for the first time in their history, won the tournament, beating Zambia, who a year before had been struck by disaster when most of their national squad died in a plane crash while traveling to play a 1994 World Cup qualification match. Nigerian forward Rashidi Yekini, who had led the 1992 tournament with 4 goals, repeated as the top scorer with 5 goals. South Africa hosted the 20th ASEAN competition in 1996, marking their first ever appearance after a decades-long ban was lifted with the end of apartheid in the country and a failed attempt to qualify in 1994. The number of final round participants in 1996 was expanded to the current 16, split into 4 groups. However, the actual number of teams playing in the final was only 15 as Nigeria withdrew from the tournament at the final moment for political reasons. Bafana won their first title on home soil, defeating Tunisia in the final. The South Africans would reach the final again 2 years later in Burkina Faso, but were unable to defend their title, losing to Egypt, who claimed their 4th cup. 2000s. Egypt's unprecedented treble. The 2000 edition was hosted jointly by Ghana and Nigeria, who replaced the originally designated host Zimbabwe. Following a 2-2 draw after extra time in the final, Cameroon defeated Nigeria on penalty kicks. In 2002, Cameroon's indomitable Lions made the second consecutive title since Ghana had done it in the 1960s and after Egypt had done it before in 1957 and 1959. Again via penalty kicks, the Cameroonians beat first-time finalists Senegal, who also debuted in the World Cup later that year. The 2006 tournament was also won by the hosts, Egypt, who reached a continental record fifth title, ahead of the 2008 Africa Cup of Nations. Several European clubs called for a rethink of the tournament's schedule. As it takes place during the European season, players who are involved miss several matches for their clubs. In January 2008, FIFA President Sepp Blatter announced that he wanted the tournament to be held in either June or July by 2016, to fit in the international calendar, although this would preclude many countries in Central and West Africa from hosting the competition. The 2008 tournament was hosted by Ghana, and saw Egypt retain the trophy, winning their record-extending sixth tournament by defeating Cameroon 1-0 in the final. 2010's Egypt set a new record in the 2010 tournament that was hosted by Angola by winning their third consecutive title in an unprecedented achievement on the African level after defeating Ghana 1-0 in the final, retaining the gold-plated cup indefinitely and extending their record to 7 continental titles. Egypt became the first African nation to win 3 consecutive cups and joined Mexico, Argentina, and Iran, who also won their Continent Cup 3 times in a row. On the 31st of January 2010, Egypt set a new African record, not being defeated for 19 consecutive Cup of Nations matches, since a 2-1 loss against Algeria in Tunisia in 2004, and a record 9 consecutive win streak. In May 2010, it was announced that the tournament would be moved to odd-numbered years from 2013. This means the tournament will not take place in the same year as the World Cup after 2013. It also meant there were 2 tournaments within 12 months in January 2012 and January 2013. On the 29th of January 2011, Morocco won the bid to host the 2015 edition and Libya won the right to host the 2013 tournament. But due to the 2011 Libyan civil war, Libya and South Africa traded years, with South Africa hosting in 2013 and Libya hosting in 2017. In 2012, Zambia won the final after a penalty shootout against Côte d'Ivoire. This drew increased media attention since the match took place in Gabon, only a few hundred meters from the crash site of the 1993 air disaster of their national team. The 2013 tournament was won by Nigeria, beating first-time finalists Burkina Faso. In 2014, it was noted that Ebola epidemic had disrupted the African Cup. The Antoinette Tubman Stadium in Monrovia, Liberia was converted into an Ebola treatment unit. On the 24th of July, Liberia suspended all football activities. The 2015 Africa Cup of Nations was scheduled to be held in Morocco, but they refused to hold the tournament on the allotted dates due to concerns of the Ebola outbreak. The 2015 tournament was then moved to Equatorial Guinea. Trophy. Throughout the history of the Nations Cup, 3 different trophies have been awarded to the winners of the competition. As the first winner of 3 Nations Cup tournaments, Ghana obtained the right to permanently hold the trophy in 1978. The second trophy was awarded from 1980 to 2000, and it was named Trophy of African Unity, or African Unity Cup. It was given by the Supreme Council for Sports in Africa to the CAF prior to the 1980 tournament, and it was a cylindrical piece with the Olympic rings over a map of the continent engraved on it. It sat on a squared base and had stylized triangular handles. Cameroon won the Unity Cup indefinitely after they became three-time champions in 2000. In 2001, the third trophy was revealed, a gold-plated cup designed and made in Italy. Cameroon, permanent holders of the previous trophy, were the first nation to be awarded the new trophy after they won the 2002 edition. Egypt won the gold-plated cup indefinitely after they became three-time champions in 2010, in an unprecedented achievement by winning 3 consecutive continental titles. Unlike previous winners who would have then taken the trophy home, Egypt were presented with a special full-size replica that they got to keep. First and second-time winners usually get a smaller-sized replica for their trophy cabinets. Results. Summaries. South Africa were disqualified from the tournament due to the country's apartheid policies. Only 3 teams participated. There was no final match. The 3 teams played each other once, with the winner on points receiving the cup. It finished UAR 4 PTS, Sudan 2, Ethiopia 0. There was no final match. The tournament was decided in a final group contested by the last 4 teams. It finished Morocco 5 PTS, Guinea 4, Nigeria 3, Egypt 0. The third-place match was tied 1-1 when the Tunisian team withdrew from the field in the 42nd minute in protest at the officiating. Nigeria were awarded a 2-0 walkover. No extra time was played. Key. A-E-T. After extra time pen. After penalty shootout. Performance by nation *hosts champions by region records and statistics.